Part 2 of My Brother Proposed to My Fiancé, his ex, and I'm mad. If you haven't watched the first part of the story yet, click the link in the description. Now, second update 2 months after the first update. It's been a while since I've posted, but a few things have happened since my last talk with Mark. So, I've been low contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him and he hasn't called me. And our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mom is now upset that Mark is still uninvited for my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie, 22 female's birthday. Her boyfriend of I think 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something along the lines of, "Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list, even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since his family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I then told her that this wasn't a time to talk about my wedding since the day was about Sophie. And if Mark or her want to talk about my wedding, they can call me another time. Sophie laid into my mom a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mom dropped the issue. For those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship, and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her again that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding, and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument and she said that if I wasn't going to reinvite Mark, then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her that if that's what she wants, then she can toss her invite to the trash, because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being an a-hole for throwing her past mistakes in her face, and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the whole situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark just to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge, she hasn't been responding. So far, most of my mom's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her and not attending, while my dad and his side of the family, which is only my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, agree with me and are still coming. My sisters are also still coming to the wedding, and of course Jen's family too. Also, I talked to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place, and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. As of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. I'm still deciding on whether I'll reinvite my mom and her family should they change their mind about a boycott, but the chances are low, and I told my dad this too, which he understands. For now, Jen and I started looking into downsizing the venue since the guest list is significantly smaller. Now for the comments before reading more updates. Well, now we know where Mark gets his crazy from. Yikes. I bet update 4 will be that Mama shows up in a white dress and makes an announcement of how Jen has torn her family apart. Update 5 will be how at your sister's wedding, she will talk loudly to anyone who will listen how horrible you both are. She needs therapy. Stat. We know where Mark gets his crazy from. First thought I had while reading this. Though I have to say that Mark's "I want to stay out of it and will tell mom to keep me out of it as well" stance is surprisingly mature here. If it's actually true and he isn't fanning the flames behind the scenes, that is. Mark is the golden child, duly noted. It's also so sad Mark won't at least tell his mommy that being uninvited to your wedding was his idea, and you just agreed with him after he requested it. I guess that's too much to ask. I've read your previous posts. I'm so sorry the both of you are having to deal with this. This is supposed to be a happy time for you both, and a 1-month relationship many years prior does not bar you from having a long-term relationship with your brother's ex. 1, you didn't even know about it until after you both became serious. Brother Dearest is still very immature and needs to get over himself. Maybe get some therapy. Your mother sounds like a narcissist and needs to cut the cord to Mark. Stop protecting him and recognize that she has more kids to mother than Mark. Now for the third update. My mom is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided to not come to the wedding, she came to stop by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food, and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that a simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him, and she said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen, and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present, since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere in the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the three of us, before Jen told her to get out. She got up and started walking towards the door, and my mom followed her, still screaming at her. By this point, she's yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground, still screaming. She hit her and tried to claw her face, and I dragged her off of her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay, before she left and called both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again, because we'll never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about this whole situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually, since she's always been a crazy witch, and they said they'd come make sure Jen is okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I said that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted. But she doesn't want my mom to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her, thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mom is blocked and everything, until Jen says otherwise. I genuinely don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she'd feel guilty having her arrested over this. But my sisters and I want to convince her too, and I'd at least want documentation in case something happens in the future. Edit. Some people were asking questions about my mom and my decision not to be open with Jen about my relationship with my parents. I figure I could give some background on why we're so strained. Like some of you said, Mark was the golden child. Mark was my mom's baby boy, and she didn't do much to try and hide it. They didn't spend much time with my sisters and I like normal parents did with their kids, unless they had to, but they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him out shopping while we stayed with a sitter or bringing him home his favorite food and toys from the store where they'd shop alone. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new expensive clothes while ours were thrifted, or new toys just for him compared to old toys we had to share with each other. If my sisters and I got gifts, they were for us to share, but my mom made it pretty clear that Mark's things were only for him and we shouldn't touch it. When Mark would screw up, I'd get punished for not being a good role model and showing him the proper way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys, and I got a beating because obviously he learned that behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When I turned 13, I pushed for my parents to start giving me an allowance. They agreed as long as I did household chores, like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was usually around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw that I was getting money, and he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work, $10 of my allowance money was given to him each week, because we were doing such a good job with our chores that he never touched. Whenever I ask him to help, he'd tell me it's not his job to do chores, so why should he bother? It was around this time that I started really distancing myself from my brother. By the time I entered high school, we only talked to each other when we needed small favors, or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I wanted to finally get my own car and make money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My oldest sister Maggie helped me start my own bank account and showed me how to properly budget and save my money. I got my first car at 18 after all of my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and for some extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly, I agreed, and for a while, the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it and helped maintain it pretty well. When he expressed wanting my parents to buy him his own car, my mom came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We got in a fight that night, which ended with her giving Mark my car and taking me to transfer ownership of it to him within the following few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else I could go at a time, I just sucked it up and sighed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit in a long ceremony just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him alone for the night. So I only had the support of my sisters and my aunt and uncle who wanted to take me out. They ended up having to bring me home at my parents' request because they made me dinner to make it up to me. It was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mom put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish, and I'm allergic to shellfish. My first year out of high school, I worked 2 jobs to buy myself another car. And at the start of the new school year, I moved away for college and cut contact with them. They, mostly my mom, tried to reach out for the first few months via social media, and Sophie. But I never responded, and I told Sophie she would be cut off too if she kept trying. When she couldn't get to me through Sophie, she tried going through my older sister Charlotte, and a few times Maggie and Mark, until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was a bluff because I had no idea how to do it, but it managed to scare her off, and the most I got from her was happy holiday texts over the years. Around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me that they had been seeing a family therapist at Charlotte's request, and my parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant, but I agreed as long as they would be genuine, and a reconciliation process started when I moved back home. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything they put me through, and it took a lot for me to even begin to let them back into my life. When I met Jen, I wasn't sure where my relationship with her was going or where my relationship with my parents was going. I didn't want to mention my family at all, mostly because I was ready to cut contact again if I needed to. Jen was understanding of it being a sore subject, and didn't press for more. I hope this helps shed some light on some of the questions I'd been seeing pop up. I would have made any reconciliation pivotal to whether or not they reimburse you for the car your mother stole. 1, I can't imagine favoring one child out of our 3. But 2, it's completely and horrifyingly unbelievable that your parents treated all their other children so awfully and incredibly disproportionately compared to the golden child Mark. And I'm really concerned that your sisters thought this was normal family dynamics to the point that they became flying monkeys for your mother. A, getting reimbursement for the car wasn't a hill I was willing to die on, since the damage was already done. Even now it's hard to believe Mark was the favorite. There wasn't anything really special about him. I don't mean that as an insult either. He was just a regular kid. My parents weren't having fertility issues. He wasn't a miracle, wasn't a meal ticket. They weren't having marital problems and using a baby as Band-Aid. He was just born and they decided to love him more than us. And believe me, they didn't think this was normal. They just have a soft spot for our parents because they are our parents, and they believe they have redeeming qualities. Mate, your parents and Mark are a-holes. You did the right thing by cutting your mother out and going low contact with your brother. Honestly, they're not family. You just share DNA with them. Live your life with the ones that matter and care for you. I do hope Jen presses charges. It sounds like the only way your mom will learn that actions have consequences. Take care and good luck. Thanks, bud. Pressing charges isn't in our future right now. We're just trying to get to the wedding. Now for the last update. I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to give me advice on what to do going forward, and all the kind messages and comments I've gotten over the past few days/weeks. Jen and I have read the comments together, and everything is appreciated. To answer the most common question about why I chose to reconnect after everything, the short answer is because I would do anything for my sisters. Charlotte wanted the entire family around for the birth of her first child and to help her while she adjusts. She didn't want part-time aunts and uncles who would only visit her kid during birthdays and holidays. She was never the type to ask for much of anything growing up, so when she asked if I would be willing to try for her, I agreed because it would make her happy. I also think part of me hoped that maybe they'd changed. I don't regret trying to reconcile either. My parents are still terrible, but I met the love of my life, so I call it a win. A few people wanted to know if there's an update, so here we go. Sorry if it's a mess or confusing. A lot has happened. We filed a report with the police and we were told that even though Jen doesn't want to pursue anything, it's not up to us to decide whether it goes further, but they would keep our preference in mind. We provided some pretty decent evidence of the assault, including pictures of Jen's face and texts with my mom and dad talking about what happened. We were advised to report and record any other incidents with my mom going further, in case anything else happens. Considering where we live, I doubt it'll go anywhere, but at least we have it on record. I got about 100 angry text messages that tell me they at least spoke with her regarding the incident. My mom tried to corner me leaving my job and screamed at me about trying to ruin her life. She kept screaming that I was an awful son for trying to get her arrested over a small misunderstanding, and she didn't understand what she'd done to deserve being punished like this. I told her that if she didn't like being in legal trouble, then she shouldn't have hit Jen. She demanded I tell the police to forget the report, which I refused. I told her exactly what the officer said about it being out of my hands. She had a tantrum in the parking lot and hit me a few times, just on the chest and arm before security intervened and dragged her off the property. I had to talk to my boss about the incident. Luckily, she was understanding of everything going on after I explained what was happening. When I got home, I told Jen what happened. She was upset and asked that we discuss the plan with my family moving forward. It was a long talk, but we took the advice of some Redditors and decided to go completely no contact with my family, aside from my sisters. We agreed that having them in my life is adding unnecessary stress for the both of us, and we aren't even married yet. She told me she wanted to consider moving away and putting some distance between us and my family. She said that she'd try to stay out of my family issues because it's not her place, but she refuses to put up with my mom and her behavior or my dad enabling her abuse. A lot more was said, too much to put in this post, but I agreed with her that they were more trouble than they're worth, and I also don't want to put up with this anymore. I also agreed to go to therapy, and she's helping me find a therapist. I decided to call my dad after our talk and let him know I would be going no contact. He didn't answer the first time I called, so I left a message asking to have a long talk. When he called back, he asked if it was okay for my mom to be a part of the conversation. I told him it was okay, since she needed to hear what I had to say too. The conversation went about as well as you could expect. I told them both that Jen and I are cutting them out of our lives. My dad demanded to know why I would do something like that, after going through all the trouble of repairing our relationship. I told him that this entire thing with Mark has shown me that nothing is actually repaired between us. And as far as they're concerned, the world revolves only around my mom and my little brother. I told him that their continued favoritism of Mark has brought our relationship to a point of no return, and that I wasn't interested in holding on to a failing relationship. I told them that I agreed to reconcile for Charlotte's sake, but I don't appreciate all of the disrespect towards me and Jen, and that I wouldn't put up with it anymore for both of our sakes. To my mom specifically, I told her that I was tired of her using me as a scapegoat for her bad parenting and Mark's attitude. I also told her that I would never forgive her for what she did to Jen and what she did to me and my sisters growing up. She started to say how I should move on like my sisters have, but I cut her off and told her that she should take her forgiveness and move on, because she would never receive it from me, especially after everything she's done this last few weeks. She started crying and asking me how I could treat her like such a villain. I told her she could only be upset with herself because I've done nothing wrong. She cried harder and told me how much she regretted having me, and how I've only tried to ruin her life. This started a heated argument between her and Jen once again, and Jen told her in much more colorful words that she was disgusting, and plenty of other nice names, for saying something like that to me. I don't know if she left the room or just decided to shut up, but my mom stopped talking when Jen was done speaking to her. My dad said he wasn't okay with being shut out of my life, and he asked me to try to understand my mom's point of view. He said that she was also struggling because her kids were at odds, and I was being unfair to punish her for her struggles with raising and caring for us. The last thing he said was that we were a family, and I shouldn't let past mistakes stop us from moving forward. I told him that the only person she ever cared for was Mark and herself, and there was nothing he could say or do to make me change my mind. I told him that it was up to him whether to keep my number, but I would be blocking him and my mom everywhere, and I wouldn't be reaching out again. Then I hung up. Afterward, I sent a long email with a link to my posts attached to my entire family and inviting everyone, except my aunt and uncle and my sisters, to the wedding. I hadn't cried in a long time, but Jen held me while I cried after writing the email, and she assured me we would be okay. My sisters also reached out to me after reading the email. I apologized to Charlotte for not being able to continue reconciling like she wanted, but she told me it was okay, and it's not my fault I had to cut them off again. The response from my family has been pretty mixed. Some are angry I aired out family issues on a public internet forum, while others are pissed at my parents because they never knew it was this bad. The last person I talked to about everything was Mark. He asked if I was cutting him off too, and I told him I wasn't, but I wouldn't be going out of my way to reach out to him either. He didn't argue, and just wished me the best with the wedding, and we haven't spoken since. Right now, Jen and I are looking for a new place to stay. The plan is to move closer to Jen's brother. He lives about 3 hours from where we are now, and Jen and I like the city he's in. I spoke to my boss about transferring, and Jen is looking into the option of working 100% remotely or possibly finding a new job. And once again, our venue's changed. Since the guest list is significantly smaller, my future brother-in-law is considering letting us use his lake house for our wedding. I don't plan to post any more about this unless the sky falls, at least not until the wedding, because I want to move on with life. But I'll try to answer any questions some of you might have. Thanks and happy holidays. Thanks for the update. I believe you decided on the only possible way forward. Nothing you will say change your mom. She alone can only change her behavior. And perhaps if she reads all the comments on your Reddit posts, she might get an epiphany and realizes she is a pretty crappy person and has a lot of amends to make if she wants to keep you and possibly your sisters in her life. Maybe therapy can help her, but I doubt it. Best wishes for your upcoming wedding. According to Sophie, she's read a lot of them and doesn't think Reddit strangers have the right to tell her she's a bad person. Lol. I don't think there's any amending left in me. Wish them the best. Just as far from me and my family as possible.